Had to check the clock, sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. Wasn't sure if it was morning or afternoon. You're joining us, I hope, for a town hall meeting regarding Rochester Community Schools and our plan for returning to school, and depending on that, what that looks like, depending on your family's choices, as well as depending on the situation with the COVID-19 virus at the time. We're glad you're here with us. We look forward to an informational hour. If you're not aware of it, we've received a number of questions through Thought Exchange prior to this meeting, and we'll be going through those questions in a little bit. Before we do that, though, I'd like to have my colleagues here that are with me introduce themselves, and then I'll have a few introductory comments just to kind of give a little bit big picture, and then we'll get into the questions and see what we can do to keep you informed and continue the dialogue. So Corey, please.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Dr. Shaner. My name is Corey Heitch. I'm the Executive Director for Elementary Teaching and Learning. So really the scope of my role in the district is everything from birth through 5th grade and all that entails. Certainly unique to think about the differences of what we might need to supply for the youngest learners in our district, all the way up through 5th grade during this current time and the requirements laid forth in the Return to Learn roadmap and other executive orders. But the collaboration that's gone on, the thinking that's gone on in an ever-changing environment has been truly inspiring to be a part of. Having said that, I know we will not be able to answer all of your questions that you may have today. You know, the goal is to hopefully provide some clarity and to answer the things that we can answer, and the things that we don't have an answer on yet, explain some of the things that we're waiting on to be able to supply that answer. So, you know, as we go through this process and through this town hall, if other questions come up afterwards, please do not hesitate to reach out either to your building principal or myself, or to use the talk to us button, and we'll get you the information as best that we have available. And I will turn it over to Miss Debbie Fragomany.
Thank you, Mr. Corey Heitch. Good afternoon, I'm Debbie Fragomany. I'm the Deputy Superintendent of Teaching and Learning. Honored to be here with you today. Elementary is my heart. I have the privilege of serving in this district for 31 years. And as we have this conversation today, and Dr. Shaner and Mr. Heitch both alluded to this, we know there are more questions than answers right now, but our intention is to do some clarifying. We understand that there are decisions to be made, but what we really want you to know today, as we're doing our best to answer questions and clarify, is that this is to support your family, and every family has a different circumstance, and we want to honor that. We want you to be able to make the decisions that are best for your family, and our continued commitment to making a profound impact on the lives of your students is our core mission. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your support and your patience through this very uncertain time. And I will turn it back over to Dr. Shaner to launch our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie, and thanks both of you for joining us today. So you're probably aware that we had a Board of Education work session last night. And at that work session, we presented to the board for their review, and really a very large, comprehensive overview of what we've been through since March, our planning process, and then kind of the compressed timeline that we've been under in terms of the Governor's Return to School Advisory Council convening in May, and the Governor's plan coming out on June 30th. If you think about it, between June 30th and today is July 28th. We've shifted and come up with a plan and also options for children. But before we get into that, I really, Debbie said something earlier that I think is worth saying again. You know, the reason we got into this work, the reason I became a teacher and administrator and ultimately the superintendent of the school district, but I'm always a teacher at heart. And get into this work to have a profound impact in the lives of children. And that really is our sole intention and our why. The kids are our why, they're the center of our decision making, albeit these are very, very complex decisions and very overwhelming. And I'm sure they are for you as a family. And for that, I'm sorry. I wish I had some control over the pandemic. I'd make it go away immediately. It certainly has cramped our style, but I would also offer that it's taught us a few things. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that later. I know I've learned a few things from it. But I want to go back and talk a little bit about big picture in terms of the budget of the school district. And we'll talk a little bit about staffing too, and how different choices that you may make may impact our operations. But let's go back really about the process just real quickly. Last week, you may have, or early this week, you may have seen a story about on Channel 7 about what school might look like that featured Rochester High School and featured me as the interviewee. And the thing I want you to know about that, there's been a little bit of criticism about, well, why didn't the public know first? So one of the things about my job is that it's important for me to advocate for this school district and advocate for public education in Lansing. And every once in a while, I'll be contacted by different advocacy groups, and they'll ask me to do interviews. And sometimes the purpose of those interviews is to shed light for people in the legislature, maybe lobbyists, maybe other policymakers, on what may be a complexity or an implication or a consequence of a choice, a policy choice might be. And that Channel 7 interview was one of those times. So if you felt like I got ahead of the community, I do apologize for that. I had a choice to make and an opportunity to advocate, and I chose it. I knew there was a risk of potentially the story coming out before you were able to see the presentation to the board last night or this town hall. But again, I unfortunately don't have a lot of influence in the broadcast industry, and I don't really have any influence on when they air a story. So I hope the story was actually helpful to you, just to get your head around what a socially distanced classroom looks like and how challenging that might be. I also hope you ask the question of, wow, how are we all going to pay for this? Because the budget is a significant choke point as we move forward. If you're not aware of it, the 18-19 budget, there was a supplemental deal between the governor and the Senate and House leadership where we were able to be made whole. The seat time waiver that was granted by the governor's executive order, as well as the days and hours regulations, are in effect until October 1st. So what does that mean for Rochester Community Schools? Well, what that means is until October 1st, we essentially have a seat time waiver, and we don't have their traditional days and minutes requirements. But when the 1920 budget expires on September 30th, October 1st, we are immediately into the 2021 budget year. And remember, the school district has to pass a budget in June. The state doesn't have to pass a budget until October 1st. They're two different fiscal years. So why am I telling you this? I need you to be aware that right now we do not have a 2021 budget. I have no way to predict our revenue, the 2021 school year, and I have no guidance on what the pupil accounting regulations will be. And if you're thinking, so what, pupil accounting, what's that mean to me? That really is the mechanism for how school districts get funded in Michigan. So if we don't have a seat time waiver, for instance, and we moved into a hybrid or a remote environment, we're going to be in danger of potentially not getting paid. And if we can't pay, we can't operate, we can't meet that compelling why that we have of having a profound impact in the lives of children. Two other things that we're keeping an eye on closely are attendance regulations and testing. There's a push in the legislature right now to require us to test kids within the first 90 days of their return to school with some type of benchmark assessment. My concern with this is we have a lot of work to do when we return to school. I know our teachers will be assessing kids formatively to figure out where they're at and how to intervene. But I also know there's a lot of trauma-informed work that needs to be done to assess where kids are socially and emotionally. So this is all really important work. Those are some of the policy initiatives that there are afoot, and that is the budget situation that we're in. And if you're not quite sure how schools in Michigan are funded, I would urge you to go to our website and look it up, our budget explainer. It's a 2-minute animated video on a whiteboard. and it really does a good job of kind of explaining how we get funded and how the process works in Michigan, if maybe you've moved here from another place, or maybe you're just not familiar with it. So again, last night was a marathon session. There was no other way to do it. It's a very, very complex endeavor to provide education in three different possibilities to our students. And I want to just really repeat again how complex and compressed this work is. So for instance, our enrollment, normally we would start predicting our enrollment for the following school year in March or April, and we'd use a linear regression model that is calculated for us by a company by the name of Decision Insight. They're experts in pupil accounting predictions. Unfortunately, because of COVID-19, we're not able to do that. Those predictions won't work. They're based on live birth rates. So we were forced to move in another direction, and that really is the impetus of asking folks to make a decision by August 1st if they can. We certainly will accommodate people if they can't make a decision by August 1st about virtual, but you can imagine we're trying to figure out staffing and predict enrollment in a very, very volatile situation. And as much as we have an obligation to deliver education to our students and provide a caring, loving, highly skilled teacher in front of students, we also feel a very strong obligation to the folks whose livelihood depends on coming to work here every day, whether it's a teacher, a custodian, a support person, a secretarial, itinerant staff, what have you. And we somehow have to do our staffing because we have an obligation to provide them with what their livelihood is going to look like based on really the business picture of the school district and our enrollment. So I hope that helps explain. I hope, I apologize, I'm running on empty here. I'm losing my voice. It's been a long couple of days, but I hope you find the time that you spend with us valuable. If you walk away from this and you have more questions, please reach out to us. You can call, you can hit the talk to us button. Those are our two preferred methods. If you missed the board meeting last night, we're in the process of rendering the presentation. Rendering is a video production term, I'm told, and that video should be available shortly. We will start with the portion of the presentation that involves the instructional choices and how we developed them. And then we'll also chunk it into the other parts of the board meeting. If you're interested in where we buy PPE and what plexiglass enclosures look like and those details, you certainly are welcome to watch that. But we thought for most parents, they want to hear about what the instructional options are and what the implications that they may have in various household cultures. So why don't we start with the questions? And one other thing I want to say before I do that. There's a lot of things that we don't know yet, and there's going to be some questions here about health protocols. One of the things that the governor's plan calls for is for us to cooperate with the local health department. We are blessed to have an excellent school nurse, and we're going to be able to add 4 school nurses based on a grant from the county executive's office here in the next couple of weeks. But we are still waiting for direction in terms of protocols from the Oakland County Health Department. And we are also seeing a relatively long lag in time of testing. And that causes us great consternation and really causes us to rethink about what we may do in the fall. I'm often asked the question of, what are we doing? Are we going remote? Are we going to be in person? And, the answer to that question is I don't know yet. I do want to be clear about this, though. The possibility of having an opening of school in a remote environment is significant. I'm not saying that we're going to do it, but the possibility is there and is significant that we may need to do that. We have an obligation to keep our staff safe and our students safe. I take that responsibility extremely personally, and we're going to make the right decision when the right time comes. So let's jump into the questions. If a student is out of school for cough, fever, cold, how are those days counted and how will they be made up? and then it says remote learning. Corey, I'm going to kick that question to you.
Yeah, that somewhat ties into what you just shared about getting guidance from the Oakland County Health Department as well, because not only are we planning for and around the unknowns of how COVID-19 might impact our students and staff, if we are to return to in-person learning, but it's the fall and it's kids getting back together, it's cold, it's flu season, and it certainly has more of a heightened feel towards it as it would have in the past. So there'll be some education that has to be communicated out to our families as well, because there's some individual parts of this that we're going to have to count on each other for, and some choices that families will have to make every morning based on what they see or hear from their kids in terms of how they're feeling and what they're observing. In terms of absences, initially I would imagine, depending on what we know, and whether it's symptomatic towards COVID or related towards that, it would be marked as such as an absence. Now, what happens after that may look different this year, depending on the length of absence. Depending on what happens with some seat time requirements and attendance requirements that count as remote learning or in person, we may be able to shift a child over to access what's happening in the classroom through the online platform connected to their classroom. So it wouldn't necessarily put the child in the virtual campus, but they would have access to what's going on in their individual classroom through Google Classroom and what their teacher is putting on there. Again, there can't be one answer that captures all of this, just because we don't know the impact that any illness will have in our community this year, whether it's COVID or not. But we know we're going to have to remain nimble, remain flexible, and be willing to work with families to make learning accessible. As we processed this scenario, one of the things that we know is that a lot of times our children are not symptomatic. And so we may have a child home that feels perfectly fine and would be able to engage in learning. So we don't want to lose that period of time. And we also don't want families to feel like they're in a position to choose the health and well-being of their child and others versus having an absence or not having access to learning. So we're going to be diligent to make sure that kids can stay engaged. It'll be a lot of communication between the building, classroom teacher, and you and your family in those situations. And we also know that we're going to have to be nimble enough to make sure that we're meeting the needs of individual situations and not just making assumptions about what may be happening in a home.
It's going to be really important for us to have good two-way communications between
Absolutely.
our teachers and our building principals and families. And I appreciate, we learned from our school nurse, Tanya Regimont, last night that as we move into the fall, and flu season begins to kick up in October, November, and particularly in December, it's something that we're going to have to keep a very, very close eye on in terms of public health. What will the maximum number of students be per elementary classroom? What will the maximum number of students per elementary classroom be set at? So I'm going to speak to this, and then Corey and Debbie,
Sure.
I'm sure they can chime in. But I just want to go back to that enrollment prediction and what staffing looks like and what people opt for. There are contractual limitations on classrooms, and I think we said last night at the board meeting, nothing about going into this next school year, almost nothing, is normal, right? And I would say that staffing is in the same situation. We're taking a staffing process that normally takes 4 months and numerous people involved in it, and compressing it down to a couple of weeks. But I just want to give you a little bit of food for thought in terms of staffing and class size. So for instance, as we ask people to opt for in-person or virtual, it's essentially what we're doing because remote is part of in-person. So let's say, for instance, we have 1,400 kids that opt for a virtual setting. Well, that impacts not only our classroom size in a normal environment, but it also impacts our staffing. So I can't tell you right now what classroom sizes are going to look like. I can tell you, we said last night in the plan that we'll engage in socially distancing wherever it's logistically feasible. And let me speak to that just for a moment. Why do we say logistically feasible? Well, we do have architectural limitations in our buildings. We have limitations with transportation. And we have limitations with sizes of classrooms, quite frankly. And when we talk about social distancing, the CDC has now said social distancing is between 3 and 6 feet. We certainly will do that when logistically feasible. But I'm here to tell you that to put kids 6 feet apart in our classrooms is not logistically feasible. We simply do not have enough classrooms to do that. We almost need double. And then it becomes an enormous transportation situation as well. And it's really not just about money. It's also about, I guess I'd call it to use the Doc Brown from Back to the Future line, the time-space continuum. Everything that we're talking about, from hygiene to transportation to cafeterias, takes time and eats into instructional time. So we're trying to be as efficient with that as possible. And there are simply some things that are not going to be feasible for us to do. So I'll let Debbie and Corey chime in about class size as well, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah, Dr. Shaner, you hit on it well in terms of the pieces that play a factor into that. And just to give numbers to those details that you mentioned with 6 feet, when we ran a model in early June about that process, depending on enrollment projections that we used, we went anywhere from 245 classrooms needed to close to 530 throughout the district, just for our K-5. And that didn't include anything with our middle and high school students. And that was not even thinking of transportation, cafeteria, all of those other pieces that we know plays a part during a child's school day. So that was just physical space required. As terms of class size, I know that's a big one in a normal year that parents are curious about and anxious about. And we have some perfect world stuff we'd love to do if there was no money issues, no facility issues, no staffing issues. Unfortunately, we're working within the parameters that we're given right now. And those parameters aren't even officially set yet based on what Dr. Shaner shared about the budget. We have some parameters that maybe gets us to September 30th. And then we have unknown parameters and guidelines that we have to work with within October 1. So I understand the angst, I understand the worry, and I perfectly understand this from a parent perspective as well. I'm sending back potentially a 5th grader and a 2nd grader next year in another school district in the county. And these are the questions that my wife and I are asking at home every day as well. And our answers change every day as well of what we feel is best based on current dynamics as those are so rapidly changing. So, in short, class sizes will be really dependent upon enrollment and what we have available in terms of staff, space, and budget. But they may not look different in some cases depending on what's going on with those 3 factors.
If I may just interject, and I appreciate you sharing, Corey, that you're going through this as well with your own elementary age children. But I can assure parents that our staff, our elementary staff, every member is dedicated and committed to help your family move through this with the transitions you're making. In all the decisions and all the conversations that we're currently having, it's about how do we build continuity of learning? How do we remove the disruption so that your child will receive a early childhood, holistic, comprehensive education? And I have every confidence in our staff members to make that happen. The one piece that I would like to just add to that as well, no matter what the class size will be, is that we are looking for opportunities to keep the main thing. And we know for elementary children, relationships are integral to their success. And that is something that we're investing a great deal of time with. And our colleagues are reaching out eager to determine how we're going to embed the social emotional wellness of all of our children. Thank you.
I think the one thing I'd like to add to that, and I appreciate the input that both Debbie and Carrie have shared. I think as folks watch the presentation and reflect and think about what's right for their families and talk to their neighbors about it, I want to assure you, there's no right answer here. We've never done this before. And I say we as parents. I have 3 children at home. I'm certainly navigating this myself. And the right answer is the answer that's right for you and your family, based on the dynamics in your household, based on the needs of your children. So let's move on with another question. What happens when we have several teachers out sick and there aren't enough subs? The sub shortage was difficult to navigate before COVID. Again, this is what we were talking about to the board last night, is one of those choke points that may cause us to move in a direction other than in-person instruction. Staffing is an issue. There was a teacher shortage before COVID-19, and I'm certain that the virus has exacerbated that, particularly as I know that we have staff members that have underlying medical issues that may not be able to report for in-person employment. Sorry, I'm in the ad building. You know, we're next to the hospital. And staffing is an issue, and I believe substitute teaching will be an issue as well. It's something we're working closely with our colleagues across the district. It is something that we're waiting for direction. One of the things that impacts this is what's the quarantine guidance if it happens to be out sick and it happens to be COVID. And again, we're waiting for that guidance from the Oakland County Health Division to help us guide that. You know, whether we put in a bank of substitute teachers in each building, or I'm not sure what we would do. That's just one thought. But we really need that guidance on what quarantining looks like and how long people will be out. So it's just another thing that we're monitoring closely. I'm told that we're going to have direction from the Oakland County Health Department tomorrow. I've got my fingers crossed and not trying to show too much frustration. Let's see, how will communal spaces such as bathrooms, walls, playground equipment be cleaned, by whom and how often? It's essential to keep the communal areas clean to keep the spread of viruses at bay. I'm going to let Corey and Debbie speak to this question, but I also want you to know that I think actually during the duration of this meeting, the rendering of the video should be done, so you'll be able to watch some of this stuff. So if you have more questions, feel free to reach out to your building principal. They've all been involved in this integrally. And I'll let Corey talk to what cleaning looks like and some of the adjustments we're going to have to make in terms of classrooms.
Yeah, there's very specific requirements that we need to be following in terms of cleaning within and outside of a building during the course of the actual instructional day, as well as afterwards. High touch areas and in-use classrooms need to be disinfected and cleaned every 4 hours. So that'll happen actually physically during the part of the school day. Some of those high touch surfaces, we're looking at a much higher frequency than every 4 hours. So if you can picture, you know, a school of 24 classrooms, there'll be a constant motion of cleaning and disinfecting and sanitizing. In terms of the bathroom specific, that's a pretty unique thing to elementaries in the sense that we have bathrooms in the physical space of the classroom. So there's some things that we're going to do to make sure that we're monitoring the cleaning of that. House staff is documenting that they're in there cleaning those facilities regularly throughout the course of the school day. A lot of education for kids, as you can imagine. You know, young kids in a bathroom is not always the easiest thing to get done correctly during a school day, but that'll be part of the education that we do on top of hand washing and everything like that. A lot of signage, a lot of reminders for the students. And again, it will just be a regular schedule of cleaning that's happening and documentation on top of that into, you know, what was cleaned and when. And then small things like removing the air dryers and going to paper towel in communal bathrooms that are outside of the classroom, restricting use of certain parts of that facility to make sure we're not using the whole facility. But that'll be a big one, and that'll be a large part of what in-person instruction looks like. If you were to view it from a 30,000 foot view, is constant awareness of cleanliness and who's been where and how we're taking care of that disinfecting and sanitizing after people have been in a space.
There'll be situations where we're going to have to remove non-essential touch surfaces in classrooms. A lot of cloth surfaces that are luxuries and nice to haves and make a classroom kind of feel like that warm, homey place. They're going to have to be removed, and a lot of unneeded touch surfaces will be replaced. be removed. And we're talking about playgrounds. The playgrounds will have to really watch that, and building by building, depending on the playground, really monitor where kids are congregating and making sure that we're not providing a place for them to congregate too much in a way that they're not spaced. Debbie, do you have something to add?
I would just like to give an update from the maintenance team. And they described that the district is committed and is ensuring that all the HVAC equipment is functioning properly and performing regular scheduled preventive maintenance. That's a high priority for us. They're making tremendous adjustments to make sure that the air circulation is increased and working at high performance. Also, the team is very dedicated and working throughout the state, throughout the nation, on what best practices are for cleanliness and the protocols, so that we can build in the efficiencies that are required to ensure a safe learning environment. Thank you.
All right. Will students be required to wear masks? Now that the governor has required masks in indoor places to protect students and staff. So you may recall that the governor's return to school plan said that lower L essentially didn't have to wear masks. And then there was an executive order that quickly followed that said young people needed to wear masks in public. So that's something that we're monitoring closely. If we were to have to make that decision today, I would say that we would be requiring masks across the board. The science on face covering is very strong. When I was on the governor's and continue to serve on the governor's return to school advisory council, the epidemiologist that briefed us essentially said there's very good longitudinal data on face covering. If you look back to the pandemic of 1918, you'll see pictures of people wearing face coverings. The science on social distancing is there, but it's not as longitudinal. So therefore it's probably not as strong. But one thing that the epidemiologist consistently said to us is mask wearing, hygiene, and cohorting are three of the best things that you can do that are supported by science. So although we presented to the board last night that we were still researching that, and we are, if we were to make a decision today, we more than likely would be requiring masks. Colleagues, anything to add?
One thing I would like to add to that, because that is a fluid conversation, is at this time we have our essential workers ability at Caring Steps to be open. Currently, the children aren't wearing masks there, but all the staff are. We also have a summer school age care program. So we're using these opportunities to optimize the experiences and take very good note on what works and what doesn't work. And from all of the media, I'm a grandma now, so I'm really paying closer attention to elementary babies. What's really important is the partnership with parents in terms of teaching your children about the hygiene and about the face masks, because ultimately they'll be wearing them when you are out in public. And that's something that our staff would be very invested in, the teaching component of it, but that will be a real huge partnership piece moving forward together.
Yeah, and Caring Steps, just if you're wondering how we can do that at Caring Steps, they're under a different licensing organization called LARA. And as we opened up as an essential worker child care facility, those were the licensing requirements at the time. If a student's teacher tests positive with COVID, will the entire class have to stay home and quarantine, or the whole school? The teacher student does run into others in the hall, on the bus, or in the bathrooms. Again, this is something that the Oakland County Health Division is telling us that is on a case-by-case basis. Another choke point that we're concerned about, and I'll share with you quite frankly, is right now our testing results are coming back between 3 and 14 days. and say that again, between 3 and 14 days. And the expectation to contact trace after the fact, you can see that the calculus with the contact tracing would be very, very difficult, if not impossible, and pretty much ineffective. So we continue to wait for guidance from the Oakland County Health Department to see what that specifically will be like. We do know that it would be our responsibility to contact trace. Generally speaking, when you call the infectious disease department at the county, they'll ask you some questions and give you some direction on what you need to do based on the circumstances at the time. I would suspect that the guidance that they're going to come out with is going to be a little bit more specific and a little bit more strict than we've experienced in the past, particularly with athletics at our high schools. But nonetheless, we are still waiting on guidance. So I really can't give you an answer on what that quarantine will look like. I think Debbie and Corey made a very important point, though. We believe strongly that a caring, loving teacher in front of kids, building relationships is the most important thing we do. So regardless of that your student's in a quarantine situation, or sick with something else, or God forbid, whatever happens when life happens, we will work with you. This is, in that sense, this is no different than any other day in school. If something unfortunate happened to one of our students, whether it be COVID-19, the flu, or unfortunately it happens from time to time, a life-threatening illness, we're going to work with families to make sure that their student can maintain those connections and get that education. And I hope you understand how passionate we are about that. We care very much about what we do. I wish I could give you a better answer about the quarantining, but at this point I can't. As soon as I have that answer and have good guidance from the health division, we'll make sure we get that out to you. What will a COVID positive staff or student need to do to return to school? How will RCS ensure the safety of students? Corey, you have a little bit of information on the current guidance on that, correct?
It would be working in partnership with our Oakland County Health Department as well. It's certainly under much tighter parameters and requirements, as if a teacher was out with the flu for 3 days, which happens during normal school years about when they return. It wouldn't simply be a teacher saying, okay, I'm ready to return, or a staff member saying, I'm ready to return, I feel better. There's certain requirements that would have to be hit in terms of what the county health division and department feels is important at that time for that area. And again, there's no set number of days or times that a person has to be out. And we haven't had it with a positive case at Caring Steps, but what I can tell you is just the guidance that we had to follow early in terms of when a student reported a fever that was not related to COVID-19 versus what we'd be doing now has changed. 4 weeks ago, it was 72 hours upon return, and the CDC, I believe, and Dr. Shaner and Debbie, correct me if I'm wrong, recently changed their guidance now to, depending on other symptoms related with it, to 24 hours. So that is such a fluid situation. We've had some situations that we've been working on the background of at other parts of our district, and even those had different timelines and guidance based on the dynamics of that individual situation. So, it's going to be frustrating because, what may have taken place with a dynamic in one school may look different in another, but that's all of the other factors that come into play. And the key will be the partnership with the Oakland County Health Department and the guidance that they're giving us as we're supporting them in that investigation.
Thank you.
If I can also share, we are very fortunate in Rochester to have a full-time school nurse. If you have the opportunity to see any of the information from last night, she has been right by our side in our decision-making and planning. We are also, through the state, receiving 4 additional nurses that will be coming in, which she will be overseeing, so that a lot of this can be maneuvered at our district level as well. And we're very grateful for that opportunity. Also, Dr. Shaner has been very deliberate and innovative to reach out to epidemiologists. Again, we've never experienced this before, and we take it very seriously that we have accurate information. to play forward, and also to ensure that we aren't setting a stage for a false sense of security that isn't based on the science, because this virus does not afford that opportunity to be miscalculated.
Thanks. Let's see. I am pleased with the virtual framework for elementary. For in-person, will students be with just their class throughout the day? Please speak to lunchroom specials, recess, as far as mixing with other students. Before I let Corey speak on this, one of the things that we're committed to, and I want you to be aware of, is almost everything we're talking about in terms of returning to school is also involves the adults' working conditions. And it's no secret that we are in a unionized environment, and these things are mandatory subjects of bargaining. So we continue to work closely. We're very, very fortunate and pleased to have a great relationship with our labor units. We've been working on these items already, and we continue as we speak. But just to be aware that these are things that we are also working through with our labor units, and are subject to change, as everything is these days. So Corey, can you talk a little bit about the framework in person, and what lunchrooms and the specials look like in recess?
Absolutely. The key, one of the key players for in-person risk mitigation is the concept of cohorting. Not unusual to elementary families. Typically we're not departmentalized. It has happened in some pockets in some grades, but for the most part, you're with your class for the majority of the instructional day. The big changes are, what happens during those typical transition times. In trying to mitigate as much risk as possible, that cohort's going to stay in their classroom as a cohort as much as logistically feasible. So certain students will have specific needs that might need to be addressed outside of the classroom, and we'll have contingencies for that and how that works. But for the most part, the kids are going to be with their class, and that includes the cafeteria model that we're rolling with. They'll be quarantined at a table, so there will be limited access to movement with other kids in other classrooms. They'll be socially distanced between the other cohorts, and there'll be staggered entrances and exits for students going in and out for lunch. Recess will have those parameters as well. Whether we designate pods for each class to be in to stay within their class, or if we feel that we're able to educate the students and to observe the students socially distancing enough, we may be able to get into some mixing in with other classes. But at that point, they're no longer a cohort, and social distancing takes up, a huge impotence of making sure that kids are far enough apart that they're not face-to-face contact for the extended period of time that we're learning about. As far as specials, our current plan, and again, I say current because it could change, and actually we had some new thinking potentially even this morning, but our current plan is that art, music, and ILS, our information literacy specialists, will take place in the classroom. Physical education, just based on the dynamics of that class, would take place in the gymnasium, but the goal of keeping students together in their group in the smallest footprint that we can make within a building is our main objective for risk mitigation during the elementary school day. And it's certainly going to look different and feel different. Kids walking in specific ways in the hallway and going right to their classroom will look different and feel different. Not having freedom of movement throughout the school day, unless based on an extenuating circumstance or need, that's going to look and feel different. And that's going to require education and awareness in the why for kids. Our kids are going to have to understand why we're asking them to do this, because we need their buy-in, and we need to support them in adjusting to learning in a different environment. Yes, they'll be in a classroom with peers, and that will feel great and look great, but the environment itself will still be different. It will not look like it did in fall of 19. And we're going to have to support our students in adjusting to that and understanding the why and the new routines and the new procedures.
In support of that, we remain committed to our diversity and equity work, and we remain committed to becoming a trauma-informed school district. And I think that supports what Corey just mentioned in terms of the challenges that we'll be faced with as we open up elementary schools. All right. In the virtual learning environment, will the school district make an effort to place students and staff from the same schools together? This will help with my child's level of comfort in regards to participation and excitement about school with having to stay home and do virtual.
Yeah, that's a question that I've gotten a lot as well. In short, let's start with the student component. We understand the value of relationships and community. And even within a virtual all online platform, we understand that we need to build community, we need to build relationships. And as part of keeping students together, we're going to make balanced classrooms, but we're going to see what the layout of our enrollment shifts look like by grade, by building. I can't give a blanket yes, we can do that, because I don't know if we can. It'll all depend on enrollment. The staffing one is much more challenging. There's contractual obligations that we need to follow in terms of staffing and shifting individuals to a different environment or a different building. And we need to work that out. So staffing would be a harder dynamic to say, I'm going to take 26 students from this building and attach them to a teacher who's moved from in-person to virtual, because we just don't know who our staff is going to be at this point. But the key is, unlike a canned virtual campus where we're buying a platform and having a mentor or a facilitator oversee a large number of kids, is we're going to be building a Rochester class that's founded on relationships, that's founded on community and collaboration, and that follows our instructional platforms and our models at the elementary level. So rest assured that relationships will still be at the heart of our building our classes, and that all of our elementary principals will have a role in making sure that we're creating balanced classrooms, because they know your kids best.
And also, I want to add to that, beautifully said, Corey, is that it will be a Rochester Community Schools teacher. We're getting a lot of questions about that, and we believe strongly that the talent and the highly qualified staff that we have are who we want in front of our children. So there will be Rochester Community School staff members that will be the virtual teachers. And there will be, if you are selecting in person that could turn to remote, you will have a cohort teacher, a Rochester Community Schools teacher as well, that will follow you from in person to that remote environment. So if that does any clarification, we've looked at 7 or 8 different platforms for virtual, and we are looking at this as a future for us once this virus has passed, because we do know that learning styles differ. And for some families, a virtual option is essential for their well-being. And so this is something that we are going to continue to cultivate and move forward with.
Thanks, Debbie. And sorry, next question. Will kids be part of a class in virtual learning, like having friends to exchange thoughts and have interactions with other kids the same age? Kids need to interact with kids to develop skills, and we can't lose that.
And I just really reiterate what we just shared. That's a major part of what we're building and what we're designing. As a matter of fact, when our teachers reached out and showed a willingness to create the content, the curricular content for the virtual campus, our ELA, our math, our science, and our social studies, one of the first things that everybody mentioned is we got to make sure that we're including social emotional learning in this, and that we also have to include that we're adjusting and reframing how you build a community in an online environment. So part of their framework and their instructional framework does just that. The first few weeks are designed to build online community and to build a community when you can't be together in person. We'll be using the Google Classroom and Google Meet along with Zoom. And one of the things that we'll be educating kids on is how to appropriately use Google Meet. And, we're going to educate, we're going to train, but we're also going to trust. And we'll trust that our kids and our families that are participating as part of our RCS virtual campus will use those tools responsible. And one of the things that we're committed to doing that we'll be working with our kids on is giving them the ability during the instructional day to connect with other kids through Google Meet. And so if they are working on a project or a writing assignment or part of a book club, that they'll be able to take some ownership and leadership of that as well, and not always have the teacher directing them to connect, but they'll have the ability to reach out to peers in their class and connect in an instructional way through those platforms.
And for those of you who currently have elementary children, we have also been very deliberate in terms of the curriculum that we will be delivering. And we aren't going to be choosing all different curriculum than they've ever been exposed to. Our math program is solid and strong and will continue, the math journals. So our children are going to have opportunities to experience a lot of the curriculum that they've already known how has been instructed. Our work and our commitment to our literacy programs will still align with the Teachers College from New York, Lucy Calkins' work. And we're doing that so that students have the continuity. We believe this to be best practice. And it also will help our classroom teachers to not only learn a whole new curriculum, but to take the curriculum that they have and be able to embed it into this different system where there's a comfort level for our students and for the teachers that are teaching, and so that they can be very invested in those relationships. We all know, all of us have been educators, that the elementary teacher leaves a handprint on a child's heart, and we know how critical it is that we provide as many opportunities and find new innovative ways to make connections for kids.
Thanks, Debbie. If we decide virtual is best for the first trimester, but then determine we prefer in person, how will we know who our assigned teacher is?
Yeah, and this goes back to the whole idea of constant iteration. We know that we have this initial preliminary timeline that we're going to build our first classes and staffing model off of, and then we also know that we're going to really start having to communicate with families pretty early into the start of the fall year to gauge where they're at. If virtual is not right for them, or they don't feel it's right for them, or if it went well but they're craving that in person or feel that would be better, we're going to just have to have a lot of two-way communication and to see where individual family needs are, to see what our current health environment looks like, because that'll certainly play an impact in transitioning both back and forth that trimester and who may need what. And our elementary principal and teacher leaders in each building are going to be integral with that. So, the best answer right now is the importance of two-way communication, staying connected to your building principal, and then as you may know more what's best for what you feel is best for your child and your family, of making sure that we're doing it in time that we can prepare appropriately and make sure that we have that continuity of learning.
And we certainly realize that, and I hope people are not feeling it, but we're trying to avoid rigidity here. We've never done this before. We realize that many of you probably 3 months ago would have never considered putting your child in a virtual environment. So we know that we have to be flexible and accommodating. We would just ask that we need your patience as well, because as we shift staffing, as we try to accommodate, we are going to need some time in certain circumstances to make those changes that you need to happen. So like everything else in the pandemic, patience and grace is appreciated, and kindness is required. So we'll work with you as much as we possibly can.
One more piece, we talk about this a great deal, and this speaks to the caliber of talented educators and team that we work with. We've done multiple surveys with our staff members in terms of pivoting from March all the way to finish the school year strong, and that was very much an important investment for us. But our staff members have come forward and have said, we began this crisis, I never even had heard of Zoom, and nor had many others. We did the very best that we could based on the science and based on what was happening. As we proceed forward, the feedback from our staff has been the remote situation, if that's where we align to, will be much more robust. We will have, and you'll see in our FAQs, if you haven't already, there will be attendance and grading, and we have a better handle now on what we're going to need to do. Do we have all the answers? Absolutely not. But I think that speaks volumes as a parent for you to know that our staff members did the very best that they could, and we're eternally grateful for the commitment that they make to our kids every day, that our staff is eager to embrace your student in person, in remote, or in virtual, and provide the most outstanding opportunity that we can based on these circumstances.
All right, last question. Will the virtual learners have the opportunity to get school pictures taken? Can they still be in their school's yearbook somehow? Some parents like to document our kids' growth through the school pictures through the year. Also, yearbooks are special to fifth graders. I think this is a really good question to close on, quite honestly, because we're talking about the importance of community, the importance of relationships. You know, the most important thing a child can feel in school is loved. So we certainly will look at those opportunities. Do I have a direct answer for you right now in terms of yes, we'll be able to do them? I would say yes, we'll be able to do them in some shape or form. We still have to figure out our staffing and how would we assign that? And then again, consider health protocols at the time. But we definitely recognize and realize that our students are going to need a sense of belonging, strong relationships, and above all, to know that they're loved. So, and I think that's a really, really good comment to end on, ladies and gentlemen. If there's anything else you take away from this town hall, I need you to know, I hope you can feel how much people are invested in your children and how hard they're working to provide in a very short period of time as effective and as engaging in education as we can possibly provide in very arduous circumstances. I hope you feel the love that each and every one of our staff members has for your students. I know the people on this call have that. I know the folks in the task force. I know our broader employee base cares very deeply about your students. And I hope you know we're working diligently to deliver a world-class education in whatever avenue is right for you and your family. So with that, I'll let Debbie and Corey have the last words, and we'll wrap it up.
I should sneak in before Debbie because this is her specialty.
Stop.
I just, again, the gratitude that I feel for our employees of Rochester. Just, you know, we're talking about 15,000 kids and we're talking about 22 buildings. And it's very rare when you think of an organization of that size and scope to truly be able to feel like a community. And I felt that every day that I've been here, and every more so, you know, even more so as we've worked through this process. This is a community. This is not a plan for individual schools. This is not a plan based on an individual situation. This is to try to provide an option and choice for families that they feel they can make that is the most important for them at this moment in time. And we know that it may change throughout the course of the years and the course of this school year, and we're going to be ready to meet that need when it comes up. So just the power of team and the power of collaboration that has come through, knowing that we're not going to create a perfect system. So just thank you to the community for staying engaged. Please do not hesitate to reach out to myself, the building principal. Use the talk to us button. It'll get into the right hands and we'll do our best to answer the questions that may come up. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Corey. You did just fine. You did great. Just want to reiterate what Dr. Shaner has said and Mr. Heisch and your building principals, who you are more than welcome to reach out to. They have been truly the heartbeat at the elementary level to make sure that everyone feels safe and valued and respected, which is part of our district respect code. And it's our responsibility and our privilege to serve your families for many years forward. If you have neighbors and they were graduates of 2020, you can talk to them about what can be done in this community when we all pull together. And so it saddened me to hear about the yearbook, Dr. Shaner. because we know that that is so important. There are so many memories that take place, and we understand that, and we take them all very seriously. And when you have a peek at what the class of 2020 experienced through the hardship and uncertainty, Rochester Community Schools will come forward and will exceed the expectations. We thank you very much. We'll continue to communicate with you, and thank you so much for your grace and patience. We appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.